Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel, or if it's your first time here, welcome especially. I'm Sally, and I'm excited you're here for this awesome conversation I am having today with Robin Lommori from the company Making Mommies. Robin works with women who are looking to conceive, not just women with couples who are looking to conceive, on optimizing their chances, and has had great success with people even who have PCOS and endometriosis, who have even tried treatments such as IVF and for whom IVF has failed to then conceive with the knowledge and the coaching that she has offered. So we're having a conversation about preparing for pregnancy, about infertility, steps to take, lots of good pieces in here, conversation as a whole, and I hope you guys enjoy. The video quality is not the best on this. We were just on Zoom, but I hope that you can play it, do your thing, just listen and soak up all the good information. Don't hesitate to let us know if you have questions, if there's more you would like to see from her or from us or just from me in general. And without further ado, let's get into the conversation. All right. Hey, Robin, thank you so much for hopping on today. I'm so excited to have you and have this conversation. To kick things off, would you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a birth center based midwife, and I also started a program called Making Mommies, which is a fertility coaching program that helps women understand their bodies so they can take charge of their fertility and get pregnant naturally. Those diet and lifestyle changes are kind of simple, but they have been found to have a really big impact on your health and optimizing your fertility to get pregnant.
Okay, that's awesome. And what got you into this in the first place?
Yeah, so I had a lot of people coming into the birth center or home birth when I was doing home birth, and they were saying, we're trying to get pregnant and we've only been trying for a couple months. We're not really ready to go down the IVF route or go to a fertility clinic. What can we be doing at home with diet and lifestyle changes to help increase our odds of getting pregnant? And there really wasn't anyone kind of filling this space. Their doctors didn't have a lot of tips and tricks other than just, hey, try for a year and then you'll go to a fertility clinic. So we were trying to help teach women about their bodies, about what would support their bodies with diet and lifestyle so that they could have a positive impact on their pregnancy chances.
That's amazing. And was it that you were working with one specific group of people and then that went really well and it kind of evolved into the Making Mommies program?
Exactly. So we started with some people with the birth center. We had like 10 or 12 people originally in like the core group that kind of started the whole thing. And it was local, just moms or women in the birth center. And then we said, why don't we take this online and try and spread the word about like, hey, anybody can do this from anywhere. We can jump on Zoom calls. We can talk about this diet and lifestyle change. And we've seen really amazing results.
That's so awesome. Yeah, definitely a big hole. And I love that you're talking about it. So we have a list of questions here that I just wanted to go through. I think you can offer a lot of insight to this audience when it comes to preparing for pregnancy and almost like busting myths when it comes to infertility and what that really looks like. So I think a really great place to start is just how long does it typically take to get pregnant?
Yeah. So there's actually been some studies that show the majority, so about 75% of couples will get pregnant in the first 3 months of trying. So there's really not a lot of data behind this whole like try for 12 months before you seek help. That's more of an insurance thing. Like health insurance is like, well, we're not going to cover a visit to a reproductive clinic until you've been trying for 12 months, but it's not actually based in the science.
Okay. And actually, this kind of goes off that, but when we say like trying, what do you mean by that specifically? Is that just, having unprotected sex, or is it specifically within the fertile window, like targeting that range?
So typically, if couples stop preventing, so whatever method they were using to avoid pregnancy, whether that be the pill or the patch or other things like condoms or whatever, if they just stop using that preventative measure, they don't even need to track all their stuff. Usually they'll get pregnant in about 3 months. It doesn't take a lot of fancy apps or charting or any of that stuff. So I always tell people the first 3 months, just be really chill about it, stop using protection, and about 75% will get pregnant in those 3 months.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's great. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate that. But at the same time, I run into a lot of people who maybe
don't know initially, just because unfortunately we're not really educated on this, that there are only about 6 days of the month that you can actually get pregnant, and people encountering what they suspect to be fertility issues, whereas maybe because of stress, just stuff like they're not trying on the right days. So as we know, you have to try, when you're ovulating or around ovulation. What would you say is the best way to track that based on your experience?
If you've been trying for a few months and you want to figure out, okay, where am I ovulating so I can better time intercourse? I think the best thing to do is the fertility awareness method. And I think you've talked about this on your channel before. There's some great videos that you've done. But the core of the fertility awareness method is basal body temperature tracking. So when you track your body temperature every day, we see this pattern over time. And that pattern allows us to determine a lot of things that are going on with your body. It tells us when you're ovulating, if you're ovulating, maybe you're not ovulating. It can also give us some insight into your thyroid health as well as your progesterone health. So there's a lot of good information from just taking your temperature every day.
Okay, absolutely. But I know you had mentioned previously too, like if someone's just starting to try, I guess just wrapping this back to your previous point, while there's a ton of benefit for whatever reason in tracking your cycle, like it can actually, I don't know, come back to bite you if you start like obsessively tracking and trying, because it just causes stress, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I usually say, like, hey, the first couple months, 2 or 3 months, don't stress out. Don't be worried about basal body temperature and the fertility awareness method and all of those apps, those cycle apps. You're just going to stress yourself out. Just try for a couple months. And then if you haven't been able to conceive in that time, then let's add those things in. So, basal body temperature is great, but then we also have these great advances in urine hormone testing. So it used to be that we really only did OPKs, right? You'd pee on a stick. If the LH was high enough, you might get a positive, and people would assume that that meant that they were ovulating. But that's really only giving us a really small picture of the puzzle. And there's other companies that are coming out right now that test 4 hormones. So instead of just testing the LH, it can test your FSH, LH, estrogen, and progesterone throughout your whole cycle. So that would kind of be like the next step after the fertility awareness method and temperature charting, would be to try one of these urine hormone tests. They're really amazing.
Yeah, I think I've talked a little bit about Anito, which is one of those for a little while. I was working with them, and it's a super cool product. It can be really helpful. But what I always encourage people into is just to remember, like, that kind of thing isn't necessary, at least at first. Like, if you're in a place where you do not know what's happening and you're trying to get more insight into your hormones, it's fantastic. But I love what you're saying is it's like just using your basal body temperature is such a powerful asset that, it really doesn't need to cost you any money either to kick things off.
Yeah, I mean, you can get a basal body thermometer for like $10 on Amazon. I mean, it doesn't have to be complicated and expensive, and that's a great place to start.
Absolutely. Okay, so what I know many of my people should be here for, but when it comes to nutrition, what foods, and it's such a broad question, but what foods should we be, eating or avoiding in trying to get pregnant? Or actually, let me say before that, even when we say like preconception and preparing for that, how would you almost like define that time period?
Yeah, so I like to term it the primester. So if you can take 3 months before you start trying to get pregnant and really focus on your diet and lifestyle, it's going to have a huge, huge impact, especially for like the male partner, because spermatogenesis is 90 days. So in some males, it's even shorter. It's like 67 days. And so if you're focusing on eating really well, taking care of your body, resting, sleeping, all of those things, you can have a huge, we've seen sperm numbers double in 90 days, doing a semen analysis and then doing a 3-month program of really focusing on getting healthy and then doing another semen analysis. We've actually seen those sperm counts double. So it can have a huge, huge impact. Just taking some time before you try, and it doesn't have to be long, like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, I personally am not probably going to be trying to get pregnant for another few years. And at the same time, like, I would just encourage everyone to realize that even if that's you, even if it's maybe 5, even more years down the road, everything you're doing now is going to affect your body, and especially your mineral stores for down the road.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I mean, across the board, we see that the standard American diet is just way too high in carbohydrates. That might not be where the majority of your audience is, but it's important to balance the macronutrients, right? So don't stress about, okay, did I get enough potassium today? Just kind of focus on those macros because the really high carb diets, they cause an insulin spike. And then that insulin spike tells the ovaries to create more testosterone, and then we're dumping more estrogen, which is making you more estrogen dominant. And then that can lead to things like irregular periods or even anovulation. And so it's important to balance the fat, the protein, and the carbs.
Okay, absolutely. That's a really good point too, in terms of like focusing first on the macronutrients. And I try to encourage people in that because I see so many people coming into this space of, pro-metabolic nutrition or whatever. And it's easy and it's fun to like major on the minors, and those, your minerals are important. Adding in supportive fats, that's important. But if we start doing all of that and actually as a result end up eating super high carb and not enough protein and fat, you're going to see crazy insulin spikes. You might even see more weight gain than is necessary. And some people, weight gain or none is necessary, that kind of thing. So
it's kind of the foundation, right? So make sure you're doing the macronutrients. You've got a good balance of those before you then start worrying about all the other little things.
Okay. And then when we do, kind of have that down, have made a priority of that, what are some foods, if we want to get that specific, or even just food groups that you would encourage people to prioritize?
So obviously vegetables, specifically dark leafy greens. Dark leafy greens are just full of vitamins and minerals and amazing. Fruits, specifically like berries and citrus, are really great for fertility. And then pastured beef, free range eggs, wild fish, those are going to be great sources of healthy fat and protein as well. And then the big thing would be avoiding alcohol. Alcohol is really significant, has a really significant impact on your fertility.
Okay. And can you break down a little bit why that's the case? And how
Alcohol
people
just
maybe
does so many things. So first of all, it's usually high carb. Like it usually causes some kind of a blood sugar spike, right? So then you could have insulin issues and all those other hormones. It usually you're not usually eating great food with the wine, right? Or the alcohol. Usually you're eating something like that you shouldn't be eating. Well, and so it's just kind of a domino effect. And then lots of people have a predisposition to become alcoholic or be relying on it too much. So I'm not saying cut all alcohol out and never have any fun. But if you are having more than 3 to 5 drinks a week, you really need to look at that. And it's hard on your liver. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your hormones and your insulin and all those things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it's like, it's not a black and white approach. Like, it's okay to enjoy that glass of wine, have a beer, but like you're saying, if it's a habit, this is certainly not the best time for it to be a habit.
Yes. And often, people can go have a glass of wine and be totally fine. And other people, they just can't do that. It's a coping mechanism. So I think people need to be honest with themselves and be like, am I just enjoying an alcoholic drink? Great. Or am I doing this to like cope? And if you're doing it to like cope, I would say, can we find healthier ways to lower your stress? Because that's not helping your stress levels.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm going to jump down my list of questions a little bit because I think that this is related, but on the topic of nutrition, can we talk about prenatals? What are your perspective, or what is your perspective on prenatals? Should women start taking them when they're trying to conceive? Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I always say you can't out supplement a bad diet. You can't decide I'm going to drive through McDonald's every night and then I'll just take a prenatal and it'll be fine. That's not how it works. Also, women have been getting pregnant for thousands of years and having healthy babies without prenatals. So I don't want anyone to freak out that they got pregnant and they weren't on a prenatal. You're going to be okay. We do want to make sure that we're taking a high quality supplement if we're going to take a prenatal. So I would not recommend running out to your grocery store or Walmart or even Target and just picking up whatever is on the shelf. You really want to find a a well-sourced supplement. And the biggest nutrient that they've studied in relation to pregnancy is actually folate. And they found that folate reduces the risk of neural tube defects. So the recommended dose is 400 micrograms of folate. And that's really the most studied micronutrient. So if you're going to do anything, I would say do folate and not folic acid. So folic acid is the synthetic version. Okay. You want to avoid that. It's not easily absorbed by the body. So find a folate supplement.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, I mean, if you're eating things like beef liver and dark leafy greens and pastured eggs, like you're going to get a lot of good stuff through your diet.
Okay. I think, yeah, that's a really helpful perspective to have. And again, it's not a black and white issue. It's like you said at first, you can't out supplement a bad diet. But at the same time, I know so many people just are not prioritizing those nutrient-dense foods. You're not eating beef liver. Maybe you're not eating dairy, those leafy greens, and you're not at a place where you're going to start doing that. And in my mind, how I see it is like we should be ideally getting as many of our nutrients from food as possible. And like, not to sound harsh, but there are times when people are just unwilling to do that, or it's just not a priority, or for some reason they can't. In which case, I think supplements can absolutely make sense, just like a general supplement. But what I would say is, especially to those of y'all, speaking to the audience, like who are in a space really focused on fine tuning your nutrition. And especially if you're taking the time before trying to get pregnant to, improve your health and your mineral stores. And like Robin said, eating those things like beef liver, leafy greens, dairy, you can build up those stores naturally and have those nutrients in more bioavailable ways and ways that are not going to throw off your ratios. And so I always love to encourage people to prioritize that. But at the same time, I'm not going to say just like never take a prenatal with, as you said, it needs to be a good prenatal, because there are people who like just aren't going to build that firm foundation. Okay, so for women who are experiencing fertility struggles, what advice do you have?
Yeah, so the very first thing would be to learn the fertility awareness method, right? Charting your basal body temperature. And basal body temperature is just the temperature right when you wake up, right? That you've been asleep for a little while. It's kind of the lowest point of the day. And so that's when you want to take that temperature. And the best way to do this, the free way to do this, there's actually an app called Fertility Friend, and I love it. There's a paid version. You don't need the paid portion. The free version is fine, and it will walk you through how to do this. Pick up a basal body thermometer. I've seen them at CVS and Walgreens, and you can get them on Amazon, and that's a great first step. And then to layer on top of that, we had talked about that urine hormone testing. I know you talked about Inito. I've used Inito. It's great. It does, I think it only works with iPhones. So if you don't have an iPhone, Prove, Proov is a company that does similar urine hormone testing, and I think they can do Android as well. So that could be an option for you.
That's great.
And then don't wait to seek help. Don't wait 12 months to go into your doctor and ask for blood work or to start making diet and lifestyle changes. You can start doing that now, eating a more balanced diet, taking time to rest, make sure you're exercising, make sure you're taking time to de-stress and connect with your spouse. I mean, those are all, they sound so simple. And our society wants this magic pill, but it's really those small, gentle things over time that have a really significant impact. So one of my favorite couples that I ever worked with, their names were Sarah and Abram, and they tried for 10 years to get pregnant because she had PCOS. And she had been to multiple fertility specialists, and they had told her over and over again, you will not get pregnant without IUI or IVF. We're going to have to intervene. And she got really serious about her diet, about her exercise, and her weight loss. And she got pregnant in 6 months, all on her own, had a beautiful baby. I actually got to be at the birth. It was amazing. And it just shows the power of these really simple diet and lifestyle changes and the huge impact they can have.
That's such an amazing and redemptive story. Oh my gosh. Like, I can't imagine being in that position and just like, getting to hold your baby after all those years. That's so cool. You said something there too that I think is worth noting, because a lot of times, again, like audience specific, I think there are a lot of people who are maybe coming out of a place of really restrictive dieting and actually maybe being too low of a body fat percentage, or just having a lifestyle where for some reason they lost their period, or being on like the we'll say like skinny for lack of better words, end of things is maybe what's interfered with conception. But at the same time, I always like to say this because people don't realize necessarily that the other extreme, having more body fat than is ideal, can also actually really negatively affect your hormones, especially when it comes to estrogen. And so it's helpful what you said there, like you have to look at both sides of the picture. It's all about balance and optimizing.
Yeah, there is an ideal BMI, and I don't love BMI as a general rule because sometimes if you're highly muscular, it can kind of like throw things off. But as a starting point, if your BMI is between 19 and 25, that's considered optimal for fertility. And if you're below that or above that, there's a high likelihood you're going to have some fertility issues. And so while the BMI measurement might not be perfect, it is a good place to kind of start and see, where am I? Could I potentially be experiencing infertility issues because I'm overweight or underweight?
Yeah. And we can use body fat percentage too, which I realize can be harder to calculate, just depending on what tools you're using. But I think it depends on how much muscle mass you have too, is what I've kind of come to understood. But if you have like a ton of muscle mass, generally it's going to be safer for you to be a little lower. If you don't, you actually need to be a little higher. But I think like 21 personally is the lowest I'd be comfortable. And then if you start getting close to like 30 is where maybe even lower than that, you start to see issues. I don't know if that's consistent with what you've
the research is 19. Like if you're below 19, I can guarantee you something is wrong with your hormones. You're not bringing in enough calories. That 19 to 21, it might just depend on your body. If you were 21, I'm not going to be worried about you at all. If you're between 19 and 21, I'd be like, well, maybe you do need to gain some weight. Everybody's body is so different. We can't just slap a number on everybody and have it work.
Yeah. Oh, and I wanted to say one other thing too. You're a midwife, and I didn't know actually until I moved to where I'm living now that you can see a midwife even if you're not pregnant. I thought it was just for pregnancy, but I talked to a lot of people too who they want to start fertility awareness method and just they've gotten no support from their doctors. I was actually able to set up an appointment with a midwife, having no intention of getting pregnant, and she was very supportive and walked me through it and can help people take this more lifestyle based approach if that's you. So I just want to throw that out there for people.
So as a midwife, I can do well woman care. So you do not have to be pregnant to come see a midwife. I can do pap smears. I can teach you about fertility awareness method. I can run labs. So if you feel like you're kind of running into a wall at your OB's office, I would highly recommend to find a midwife in your area.
That's so helpful. And again, needs to be talked about more.
Yes. A lot of people I talk to don't even know what a midwife is.
I know. Oh my gosh. Or it's like woo-woo or something. As how people think it. It's not that way. Okay, well,
there's like a Jim Gaffigan thing, and he's like, we had a midwife because we believe in witchcraft. It's just laugh because people just don't know. They don't know.
Oh, I know. It's so sad. But you just have to laugh at it. Moving down to the next question, though. If you are coming off hormonal birth control, what would your recommendation be and how long to wait before trying to conceive?
So I tell people to wait 3 months. And that's because when you're on hormonal birth control, those hormones are kind of suppressing your body's natural production of hormones. So we want to give your body some time to kind of regulate itself. And people who get pregnant right after the pill, I have no science to back this up other than just personal experience. But I have seen in my practice, people who get pregnant right after coming on the pill, a slightly increased risk of miscarriage and low progesterone. I don't know if there's data to back that up. I should Google it and research it. But it's interesting because when you are on synthetic hormones, it is suppressing your body's ability to make hormones because you're giving it synthetic ones. And so it does take time for your body. And some women don't ovulate for a few months after they come off the pill because their body is not able to kind of regulate itself. So this would apply to all hormonal birth control, a pill, a patch, an injection, the implant in the arm, all of those things are hormonal birth control. If you're just using a barrier method like a condom or a diaphragm, you don't need to wait the 3 months. But I would just recommend, let's make sure everything's kind of back to normal.
And do you know, actually, if you are using like a copper IUD, would you still recommend people are waiting with something like that, or just kind of gauging how their body's feeling after the fact? I don't know if you have
So
experience
there's
with
two
that.
different kinds of IUD. There
Okay.
is a hormonal IUD and there's a copper IUD. So the hormonal one is releasing hormones, although it is to a much smaller degree and it's very localized compared to like a pill. And that I would still wait a month or two. If you're doing the copper one, it kind of irritates the lining of the uterus. So it makes it harder for the sperm to swim. It makes it harder for the cervical mucus to do its job. It makes it harder for a fertilized egg to implant. And so that's not messing with your hormones at all. The copper IUD is not going to mess with your hormones. So that's different. You wouldn't really need to worry about that as much.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah. I mean, it has a whole host of side effects potentially, but that's a different topic. And I'm glad to know that it doesn't, affect fertility potentially in the same way. That being said, birth control is a stressor on the body, which is part of the reason we need to wait. But when it comes to stress as a whole, how, I guess, does stress affect fertility?
Yeah, so studies are kind of showing that it's unlikely that stress alone is what's causing infertility, but that stress and all the things that kind of come with it, right? So when you're stressed, you're probably not sleeping as well. When you're stressed, you're probably not eating as well. Maybe you're skipping your workout routine because you're trying to get things done. And so it's probably all of those things together that are having a significant impact on fertility. And your body is smart. Your body knows that when you're stressed, it's likely not a good time to have a baby, right? Same thing with like exercise-induced anovulation, right? So when you're exercising a lot, sometimes you can stop ovulating. Your body might be thinking, wow, we're running miles and miles every day and we're not getting enough food. Maybe the environment is not good to have a baby right now. I'm going to stop prioritizing making reproductive hormones. I'm going to stop ovulating. And the stress hormone cortisol can actually disrupt messages from the brain to the ovaries. So that could also be a factor as well. When you're stressed, you're not having sex as frequently, probably because you're stressed out. You're trying to do all of the things. And so there's layers there, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, it's also worth noting that even if stress itself is maybe not affecting fertility as a whole, it can affect your pregnancy because you're depleting your mineral stores. And bear in mind that, like, as the mother, you're going to be giving the baby so many of those minerals throughout pregnancy that maybe the baby's still getting what it needs, but you could be screwing yourself over in the long run.
Exactly. So that's what we see a lot of is the body's going to prioritize the pregnancy. And so a lot of our moms will be deficient in iron or calcium or other minerals because they didn't have a good level to start out with. They're not eating well during pregnancy, or they're stressed in pregnancy, and the body is prioritizing the baby.
Okay. Yeah. It's definitely pays to. So you mentioned, go on. What were you going to say?
Oh, it's the iron thing specifically because we need your iron stores to be really high for the potential blood loss that you're going to have at birth. So that's something your OB is going to monitor, or your midwife is going to monitor really heavily, is your iron, your hemoglobin, your hematocrit, and those things. And so if you're not prioritizing your diet, it can become a risk for your actual birth.
Yeah. And I would just encourage people to remember too that low levels of iron don't necessarily mean that you don't have enough iron in your tissue. It can be a copper issue. It can be a vitamin C issue. And so that's why we always recommend like beef liver. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why good providers will not just test your iron. They're going to test a whole panel of things. They're going to test your hemoglobin and hematocrit. They're looking at the whole picture.
That's great. Absolutely. And good for like potential moms to be aware of that going into it so that they can ask for the right things too, if for some reason they were to encounter a situation where maybe their provider didn't explain or didn't offer. You mentioned exercise though as a stressor. When it comes to continuing one's exercise routine when trying to conceive, is this something you would recommend? What are the do's and don'ts of exercise?
So super, super important to move your body. But on the same token, not to overdo it. It's kind of like Goldilocks, right? We don't want too little. We don't want too much, especially cardio. If you're going out and you're running marathons, that's really hard on your body when you're trying to conceive. It's really hard on your fertility. There's actually a condition called exercise-induced hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is just a fancy way of saying you're exercising so much that your body stops ovulating.
Okay.
And obviously no egg means you can't get pregnant. So if you are even a half marathon runner, you've been struggling to get pregnant, you might want to cut that back and add in some weightlifting, because weightlifting is amazing for hormones. It does a really good job of balancing your hormones. And we've seen really great success, especially for women with like PCOS or estrogen dominance, when they add in some weightlifting.
Okay. That's very good to know. And I think as a whole, people should just, I always encourage people to think about it intuitively. Like, you don't want to run yourself into the ground one way or another. It's all about balancing recovery, eating enough to support your exercise. And like, if you feel like crap, you probably shouldn't be,
exactly,
pushing yourself.
And you're not at the gym trying to become like completely ripped. I'm talking like 2 20-minute weightlifting sessions a week has had huge impact on our PCOS moms and their hormone numbers. Yeah.
That's so cool. This is like unrelated and pertains more to pregnancy specifically, but I've actually wondered, because I work at a gym part-time, and something I'll see is if someone first gets pregnant, they're told not to bring their heart rate up past about like 73% of their max heart rate. I might be getting that number wrong, or they're told to keep their heart rate down a little bit. Do you know why that is? Or like, could you explain, is that valid, or what's going on there?
Yeah. So again, I don't like anything that we're like going to apply to everyone all the time. If you've been working out pretty heavily before you got pregnant, then you can continue however well if you feel well enough to continue that exercise, listen to your body and continue that exercise. If you've been a couch potato and suddenly you're pregnant and you're like, I'm going to go to the gym because I want to have a really healthy pregnancy, we need to ease into that. We don't want to stress you out, right? So again, there's just not this one size fits all. The concern is blood flow to the uterus, and it's actually an outdated concern. It was that if you got your heart rate pumping really high and your blood pressure got really high, then oxygen and nutrients couldn't perfuse across the placenta. I've never seen it be a problem or any really like hard scientific data on it being an issue. But again, listen to your body. And kind of, if you're new to exercising, you've got to ease into it. You can't just be like, I'm going to go run a marathon today because I'm pregnant and I want to be healthy.
Okay, thank you. I've always wondered about that, so I'm glad to know. When it comes to, if you've been trying for 3 months, for whatever period of time, I guess, and having trouble, at what point are you going to recommend someone go see a fertility specialist? And like, who would you recommend they see?
So if you've tried for 3 months, maybe you've tried fertility awareness 1 month in there, but you've tried 3 months, I'd say go to your OBGYN or your midwife or even your primary care doctor, whoever you have a good relationship with that would be willing to order some blood work. And then ask, hey, I'm trying to get pregnant. I've only been trying a little bit, but I'm wondering if we could do some blood work just to make sure everything's okay. So you can do a hormone panel, you could do a thyroid panel, you could do vitamin D. That has a big impact on fertility. So just go and see if anything is wildly out of range. Ask them, they know your medical history. So maybe you have a specific condition. If you were like pre-diabetic or something, we'd want to check your A1C. If you had a history of anemia, maybe run a iron panel, all of those things, and just see what comes back. There's no need to wait 12 months and then go to a fertility clinic. There's steps in between, right? So you can go talk to your OBGYN. You can come join my program. We talk all about how to take charge, how to talk to your doctor. We do a semen analysis. If your husband, your partner has a good relationship with his primary care, you could also ask for a semen analysis. Because up to 50% of infertile couples have male factor infertility. In the last 40 years, we've seen a huge decrease in sperm count numbers. And so it can be really helpful information to have if his doctor is willing to run that test.
Yeah. And it's just not valid. I know you told me this previously, like we so commonly peg infertility on the woman. And as you're saying, like at least 50% of the time, it's the dude. Yes. It can be. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And the great thing about the semen analysis is, like I said earlier, you can drastically improve the semen analysis numbers in as little as 90 days with not crazy stuff. I'm just talking like a little weightlifting, cleaning up the diet, prioritizing sleep. That's it. And you can, I've seen clients literally double the sperm count number. So that's the wonderful thing about male infertility is it more easily corrects itself. Their bodies are just not quite as complicated as female bodies in regards to reproductive hormones. And so it might take a little bit longer to figure out if there's a female infertility issue, but the male one is a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah. I would just encourage anybody, whether you're a male or a female and you're struggling with infertility or feeling overwhelmed by it, just like your body was made to do this. Your body is not broken and
you're not a lemon.
I know, exactly. And like you can dive into these fundamental steps, diet and exercise, and it takes patience, but like you can correct what's going on at least 99% of the time. Okay, I pull that number, out of a hat. But like, obviously there are special circumstances, but just because your conventional care provider is saying, oh, you can't get pregnant, just push for why. Do your own research. And honestly, just don't take that as an answer because there's so much potential to be had. And it's just a shame. Like, I don't know, to immediately go to IVF or like, is it?
I've had couples come to me and they've done 4 rounds of IUI, intrauterine insemination, and they never ran a semen analysis. And it just blows my mind. You do have to be your own advocate and speak up for yourself and do some research. Number one. And number two, look at this as like a long-term thing. IVF, there are some people who absolutely need IVF, and I'm glad that we have it. I'm not trying to bash fertility clinics, but it's a Band-Aid. It's not fixing the root issue. And so, especially for women, let's say you have estrogen dominance and that's preventing you from getting pregnant. That's going to affect other things down the road in your life. Breast cancer, uterine cancer, cervical cancer. These are all estrogen dominant tissues that you're putting yourself at a higher risk for cancer by not addressing the issue. So think long term. Yes, you're improving your fertility, and yes, you want a healthy baby, but you also want to be around to enjoy your family. So this is a long-term investment in your health.
For sure. And as you said earlier, there's such simple steps you can take right now. Like figure out, are you actually ovulating? When are you ovulating? Tracking your basal body temperature. I'm so excited to know about the app that you mentioned. What's it called one more time?
Fertility Friend.
Okay, I'll link that below.
It is the most basic app. It does not have all the bells and whistles. It is not like pretty and well designed, but it's free and it will walk you through how to take your temperature, what is going on with your body, when did you ovulate, how's your progesterone doing, what was your luteal phase, that's the second half of your cycle, was that long enough? I mean, for a free app, it's pretty great. I get frustrated. I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second, but I get frustrated with all of these charting apps that just have you put in the day you had your period, and then they just guess when your most fertile days are. That's just not helping you. You really need those basal body temperatures to know what's going on.
Yeah. So those apps where you're just putting in your period date, they're based on the average, and none of us, like very few of us, are actually going to follow the average every single month. And that also is like a big mistake people make when they're trying to use fertility awareness for birth control, and why doctors don't believe in it.
Exactly. So there's a difference between the fertility awareness method and the calendar method. So calendar method, the app is only asking you for the day you started your period, and then it's guessing. So if you tell the app, I normally have a 28-day cycle, it's going to guess that you ovulate on cycle day 14. If you tell the app, oh, I have a 34-day cycle, it's just going to count back 14 days. So it's going to guess that you ovulated on cycle day 20. So if you're not giving your app any other information other than when you started your period, it's likely a calendar-based app, and that's not going to give you very accurate information. You've got to be giving it more data to interpret.
Okay.
That's fertility awareness. So fertility awareness method is basal body temperature and cervical fluid if you wanted to do that. Not everybody wants to do that, and that's fine. There's a lot to be gleaned from just the basal body temperature, but that's how you can differentiate the calendar method from the fertility awareness method.
Okay. Yeah, that's, again, very helpful. I'm going to link that app below, and I'll link some other resources on that topic because I'm always encouraging people to dive into it. This, I know, is on our list of questions, but I'm curious if someone does find that they are not ovulating, that they're experiencing anovulation, what generally would the first step be?
So the very first thing I'm going to look at is their BMI. And I know BMI is
Okay.
not a great indicator. We talked about that, but it gives me kind of an idea of where to go from there. So if they are underweight, we're going to talk about possibly gaining some weight in a healthy way, reducing their exercise routine if they're over exercising. Those are the two most common on the underweight side.
Okay.
If they're overweight, then we need to look at things like weight loss because estrogen can be stored in the fat tissues. We need to look at estrogen dominance, and we need to look at PCOS. A lot of women come to me and they're like, my doctor's never tested me for PCOS. And the first thing I do is order some blood work to see what's going on with those hormone levels. Because PCOS is not a black and white line. There's kind of a gray area that you slide into it. There is a definitive diagnostic, like once you hit this level, hormone level, we would classify you as PCOS. But there's a lot of gray area where there's hormone optimization that could occur to get them ovulating again.
Okay. And you do clearly a lot of work with that in your program if someone were interested in hopping in.
So
that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those are the three main issues that we see are usually they're either not ovulating because they are underweight and overexercising, or they're not ovulating because of a PCOS or an estrogen dominance issue, or there's a semen analysis issue. Those are the top three kind of things that we deal with over and over again. They're very common.
Yeah. And they're fixable. You're able to address them. I'll link also a video I did on addressing estrogen dominance in the description of this video too, which can be a great place to start if you're just trying to understand a little bit more about what that is. And it's super common. But, first steps, we'll link, of course, Robin's program, Making Mommies. I love the name of that. It's so cute.
Yes.
And one more question, which ties a little bit back to, seeking help, just for anyone who is coming in to this process with pre-existing medical conditions, what would your biggest piece of advice be?
Talk to your doctor. I mean, there's so many different medical conditions. I could not sit here and go through, all of them and what you should do. But in general, the more controlled your condition is, whether that's through diet and lifestyle or by medication, the better off your fertility is going to be. So if you are pre-diabetic, we need to get your blood sugars under control. If you're hypothyroid or you have Hashimoto's, we need to maybe add in a thyroid medication or make changes to get your Hashimoto's antibodies under control. So whatever your condition is, work with your doctor to get to a healthy place with that condition, or as healthy as you can. Maybe you might need a prescription medication to get to that point, and that's a conversation for your doctor.
Yeah. Okay. That is great advice. And again, so much of this is so simple. We just are not taught it, and we're not conditioned to think like that. So I really appreciate you doing this. I would say if people have more questions, like for you specifically, or would like to see another video on this topic, let us know, because I'd certainly be open to doing something like that. But go check out Robin's
we could do
program.
A lot of different things.
Oh, I know. I love the idea of talking about like the male fertility piece. I think a lot of people would be interested in that. So that would be really neat.
Yeah. I always say sex ed made it seem like getting pregnant would be really easy, and sometimes it's not. And it's not that your body is broken. It's that they didn't teach you what you needed to learn.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, is there anything else you want to share before we end this call?
No, I just want to thank you so much for allowing me to come on here and talk about what I'm just really passionate about. And I just want to be encouraging to women that whatever diagnosis or whatever they're struggling with, that is not set in stone, and your body is amazing and it can heal. And there is a community of women. You are not alone. You are not the only one dealing with this. And I would love to come alongside and support you.
Well, thank you so much, Robin. That's perfect. It's so good talking to you.